All right, so we're back here on another Commanders in the Chat podcast, episode 46. Your boy is flying solo. Your boy Cruz had to do his thing. So, hey, we here. Your man, Couch Coach, the Commander, is here. And, man, obviously, if you're listening to this now, this is the post-game show where the Commanders fell short today by the final score of 27-36 to the Detroit Lions. Yikes. It was a tale of two halves. Obviously, being down 22-0 at half and then actually coming back and making it in the game in the second half and pretty much almost had a shot of winning this football game. But yeah, this was one of those matchups where I know a lot of people looked at it from the surface. It was like, well, we got a shot. But I always said, and back in my mind, even last week when we discussed it in the Jacksonville game, we couldn't have a slow start. And that was one of the key things because obviously Detroit pretty much fought back in the Eagles game. So I knew for certain, like, we cannot fall victim early. We couldn't have a slow start because this team is pretty much all gas. So, and they embody that Dan Campbell knee biting mentality. This is the team that he envisioned in that press conference 2 years ago. So I kind of figured that was kind of one of the initial things going into this game that I knew potentially if we fell victim of that circumstance, that it was going to be a long day and there was a potential for us to lose, and it kind of came into fruition. So my initial thoughts on actually this game in itself, you just can't be down 22-0 going into half. That first half, that first quarter was so demoralizing. There was so many different situations where even in that series, in most of those series, the offensive series for Detroit, where pretty much they had maybe a few plays in their own territory, but then they moved the ball in our territory very well. And initially, those first couple of drives, okay, well, we got some solid. We got a field goal out of one. We had a goal line stance of one, and that goal line stance actually ended up leading to the to that safety to make it 5-0. But that coupled with my biggest thing was coming out of that half was essentially being down 22-0. We're going to really see the resolve of this team. Because at the end of the day, it's easy for you to be down 22-0 and just be like, you know what, forget it. The game is over. It is what it is. I really wanted to see the fight of this team in the second half. And we did get a fight until the end, essentially, in this matchup. So that was one of my initial thoughts as far as how us coming back in that second half. But the other major initial thought was this defense. This defense is horrible. And something that we chronicled last year a lot as far as when it came to X factors on the opposing team, we always circled in their wide receivers and their running backs. And the same thing we talked about it this week, where you look at, we knew St. Brown was going to go off. We knew about the record, 7 straight games with 8 or more receptions. And I knew he was going to get, he was going to get to his 8th consecutive game because we know this pass defense is horrid. Obviously, it goes back to last year, which they were 31st in the NFL, and it's who knows what it is now going to now week 3, but they're pretty much on the same trajectory, considering the fact we didn't make any moves in the offseason to help improve that horrid pass defense, and we knew that was going to be a factor in this year. So it's the same thing that's going on this year, but luckily this year we have some offensive firepower. So that can help sometimes negate it. But obviously, we can't get stops. And you look indicative in this game where we didn't make the stops when it was needed. That was the biggest thing because we were coming back and we were driving. So every time we were scoring, getting back in, then Detroit goes back, scores. We don't get stops. And then that's what ultimately happens. So that's where that defense, once again, is just wearing on this team. and it's kind of a forecast of what can happen potentially when you go into these other. Obviously, we have Philly next week, and we got other teams throughout the course of the season where, once we deal with actually official one, wide receiver ones on rosters, that we're going to get exposed week in and week out like we did in 2021. So that defense is still an issue. It's just one of those things where I don't know what on earth is going to happen, what adjustments are going to have to be made at this point, because it's literally the same thing. It's almost like our defense is really insanity. We went from a point where we were 31st last year, didn't make any moves to help improve that 31st worst pass defense, and now we expect different outcomes. That's insanity. So and that's one thing too, knowing that going into this game and probably going into the next 15 matchups that we have in the rest of the season, the key is to get the opposing wide receiver active, and they know he's going to have a big game. So it's almost like, even if you're a fantasy person, like we talked about it last year, start our opposing wide receiver ones and twos. You're gonna get bang for your buck, because we cannot stop any of that. And this was a game that was definitely indicative of it. And this is where being down 22-0 is bad, because we put our offense in such a bad predicament, because we know defensively we couldn't stop this team. We couldn't stop them at all. And for them to give the offense such a big ask to, hey, bring us back in, and we down, by 3 possessions, and the defense not even giving them an opportunity to actually make a stop and actually get to a point where we can tie this game and actually be in position to win this game. So that's one of my initial thoughts, the 3 initial thoughts that I have about this game. This is it's one of those where you're going to learn a lot from this team. Today really showed me, okay, you got Philly next week. What are you going to do when your back is against the wall? Now you're going into this matchup 1-1. You're going against, arguably, many people say it is the best team in our division. What are you going to do? Especially after a loss like this. Because I always say you'll take a loss, because losses build character. This is the type of loss that, hey, it's going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth for the rest of the week. What are you going to do between now and 1:00 next Sunday, to get your team ready and to actually put your foot and put that pressure on the Eagles, and actually the NFC East in itself, put us on notice, and just had no fight, especially in that first half. But if I'm a glass half full person, so obviously considering the fact that they obviously scoring 27 points in the second half is one thing that's a positive. But other than that, this game was horrible. So. And there's a couple of things how I think the game was actually lost. Obviously, I think the first thing, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, was the safety. I think that was a really demoralizing drive, because I thought that was going to be the start of something good, because obviously that was the second really offensive possession for Detroit, where obviously the first drive they scored 3 points. Then obviously they came back driving down the field. They had a big play on that drive that led to that fourth and goal, and they didn't convert. So I thought that was going to be a perfect opportunity if we can march the ball down maybe 97, 98 yards down the field, and that could demoralize Detroit's defense and put us back in the position. That was one of the keys. I think that safety kind of got everything out of whack, because obviously at that point we still wasn't necessarily stopping their defense. They were still scoring on us, but that was even on that first possession. But it's the second one where we had that stop, and I think that would have been a great catalyst for us to kind of get the offense going. But obviously Carson Wentz fumbled it in the end zone, and it resulted to a safety. And that was pretty much the beginning of the dam exploding on us. And at first, in second quarters that ultimately let us be down 22-0. So, but those are the two things I looked at how the game was lost in the first half. But in the second half, when they were coming back, there was a few things that kind of got me a little like question mark. Obviously, the touchdown, the first touchdown in the fourth quarter, when at that point we were down by 8. I think we were down by 8, and we went for the extra point, and we went for the 2-point conversion and failed. And what also happened was in the next possession that we scored, Joe Slide missed the extra point. So that's why we essentially was down by 9. So that's kind of one of those things where if you would have kicked the field goal, the next possession you would have been down by 8. You could have went down on the second possession on the touchdown where Joe Slide missed. You could have tried to go for 2 at that point and then potentially tie this ball game. And the other thing that really rubbed me the wrong way, which I was really shocked that this happened. Obviously, that final touchdown drive, we had maybe about 3 and some change left. But all of a sudden, it's like there was no sense of urgency. We were in the red zone. I'm thinking to myself, like, there's no sense of urgency, no hurry up offense, no nothing. Like, we literally was still continuing that drive after the 2-minute warning. And especially when you're down that point, that extra minute could have potentially helped you down the road. Like, it didn't bite us in the butt per se. But if we would have had another crack at it, it would have been more comfortable with maybe shaving off a minute off the time and what have you. So I really thought that was kind of odd. And I think Washington probably thought that, hey, Detroit was just going to let us score. But no, and some of those few possessions, if they don't look like they're just going to let you just score, you need to have a sense of urgency. You need to have a sense of urgency in that play, because you kind of need to mimic, because the next possession was going to be almost eerily similar to that. So I didn't understand the fact of there was no sense of urgency when it was like 3 minutes left to go. You were down by 9. You must have a sense of urgency at that point in the game, especially considering the fact you done pretty much damn near came all the way back. So that's one of those where I'm like, why did that particularly happen? Like, why was that possession like that? That's why I was kind of taken aback about that. But there's a rhyme to a reason to everything. But I know personally, me, that would have been a sense of urgency. I would have at least gotten Detroit the ball back at the 2-minute warning. Worst case scenario, even though we did score right off the 2-minute warning, but that's totally fine. But they should have had a situation, in fact, where they should have hurried up this offense and should have scored a lot earlier than what they did. So those are the kind of keys where I look at where this game was potentially lost. So then I get about grades. So in this game is very interesting because obviously this one I'm going to just give grades to the offense and then to the defense. So the offense, to me personally, I'm going to give them a C. And the only reason why I really want to give them a C, because I think they did the second half, they deserve potentially A- or B+. They did great in that second half because obviously you look at their numbers as far as what they was able to amass. Obviously, I think they had 21 first downs because at one point, I think going into the half or maybe like at some point in the first quarter, they didn't have any first downs, but they ended up having 21 altogether in total. Carson Wentz did okay. Obviously 30 for 46, 337 yards and 3 touchdowns. And they had that cost the interception, but they were back. Their backs was against the wall. Like their defense really didn't help them with them being down 22-0 and pretty much. So I'm going to give them a C because obviously they get an F obviously for the first half because they did nothing offensively. They couldn't score to save their lives, but that's here nor there. But the biggest thing I think why they get that C because of that second half. They was able to do their thing obviously with the passing game and had opportunities to score at will at this point. So I'm going to give them that grade, just the simple fact of that scale, essentially, because of just the simple fact of, hey, they fought hard offensively. So I'm going to give them a C. So the defense, a F, a F minus. F plus, F plus probably an F plus, and this is where you cannot. I don't care who you are. I don't care. You cannot give up 425 total yards and expect to win a football game, especially this team. Some teams you may can get away with that on a weekly basis. But not with this team. You cannot give up over 425 yards of total offense and then giving up 191 rush yards, which DeAndre Swift and he did away with us. And those where you look at, these are things that happen often, because even last week, even in a win, Jacksonville almost had over 400 yards. They almost had 400 yards on us offensively last week. So in 2 games, we gave up well over 800 yards of total yards on our offense. So this is one thing where this is going to be a problem that was in 2021 that's going to carry over into this year, and you're going to see a lot of it. And I guarantee you, it may not be every week, but I know we're going to be giving up 300 plus, 400 plus each week, and it's going to be upsetting. It's going to get to a point where you'll see, this week we gave up 325, 415, 500 one week, 400 and some change. So it's just atrocious. It's just damn near disrespectful. But the good thing about it is this week is over. And hopefully this week will be a week where they can get their act together. They could focus a lot more, hopefully, and knowing that their backs are against the wall, especially when you go into your next 2 games, are divisional games. So you need to at least make a statement in these next 2 weeks with your play. So who's to say? I have no idea of how this is going to pan out for this team. But today was just another bad day at the office. Next week, hopefully, will be a better outcome for this team. But who knows? The way the defense is playing, I doubt it very seriously. Hopefully, we can get a better start going forward for these next games. Don't want to be down a 22-0 hole, because this team is not built to have leads, to be trailing behind of that type of nature. So, yeah. But, we'll put a bow on this week's Commanders in the Chat post game. So definitely check us out on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram under Commanders ITC. And also, we're not giving up no game balls. No game balls this week. You only get a game ball when you win. That's going to be the new rule here on the Commanders in the Chat. Game ball only go to winners. We did it last year. We're not putting lipstick on the pig and making her a beauty queen. We just not this year. We're not. So no game balls this week. We got a great show lined up for you. So we'll be back on Thursday, and we'll post that on the social media, Commanders ITC, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also check out our YouTube page as well. We'll have our guy Cool McCain from the Play Caller Sports Talk, and also from Eagles Elite Podcast, previewing our matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. So this has been your man Couch Coach. And definitely huge shout out to our guy Rob. Couldn't make it with us tonight, but hey, we'll be back in effect next week. So we'll catch you guys next week, man. This has been this week's Commanders in the Chat. We'll catch you guys next week, and we out.